October 1985 brought Crash issue 21. This cover was a representation of the upcoming game Astroclone, previewed but not reviewed in this issue. However, as usual there are a number of highly regarded and some not so great games, so let's look through the 10 best. We start this month with two games in joint 9th place. The first is A Tangled Tale, written and published by D. Watson. This is perhaps one of the cheapest text adventures ever released for the Spectrum, retailing at only 99 pence. It's based on the Lewis Carroll stories Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. In this game you have to solve 10 puzzles to untie 10 knots. Crash felt that the game compared favourably to games 2 or 3 times the price. They also felt that the design of the game would hold the player's attention for some time. They described the puzzles as difficult, but gave the game an overall score of 8 out of 10, although converting the scores to a percentage gives 70%. Not so much for a text adventure as a puzzle game, although one that doesn't really give you many clues as to how to tackle the problems. I struggled to make progress even after downloading a copy of the solution. It's a curiosity, and not a game I can see having much appeal to the modern gamer. It's so different from the usual norms of text adventures that nowadays just comes across as confusing and difficult. Also in 9th place with 70% is The Rats. This was released by Hodder and Stoughton and based on the James Herbert horror book of the same name. In this game you research the origin and nature of the rats, and weapons to use against them, and then deploy forces to defeat the rats. This game is unusual in that it is perhaps the first to have 2 reviews in Crash, one in the adventure section and one in the strategy section. In the adventure trial column, Derek Brewster had a number of criticisms. He found the loading sequence clumsy, the instructions to be all over the place, and the system for deploying troops to be hard to keep track of. However, he said it looked generally nice, apart from the scruffy London map, and gave it 7 out of 10 in all categories. In the strategy column, Crash described the game as a mixture of innovative successes and miserable shortcomings. They liked the original and atmospheric title sequence, and the narrative quality of the text in the adventure sections, but like Derek, they found the loading sequence unfriendly and the instruction booklet practically unintelligible. They actually gave the game higher percentage ratings in some of the categories, but again an overall rating of 70%. It's a game that doesn't really hang together well. Both the adventure and strategy sections seem fairly limited and menu-driven. The game feels disjointed, jumping into scenes of people encountering the rats, some of which are quite horrific even if not shown. I didn't find this enjoyable at all. It's an interesting idea, but one that fails in its execution. I'm not sure who it would appeal to. In 8th place with 73% is Star Firebirds from Insight. This is a space shoot-'em-up and a conversion of the arcade machine of the same name. Crash recognised that it was a game that seemed dated, but found it enjoyable and playable, although rather easy and therefore a game that may not sustain interest. They felt it would be good for shoot-'em-up fans, but just generally found the £7.95 price tag to be too high, saying that they would recommend it as a budget game. The scores varied widely, with value for money only getting 43%. I had a different opinion than Crash. I'd not heard of this game until now and was pretty impressed by it. It's just a smooth, nicely responsive shoot-'em-up. If it hadn't been for Mooncrester in issue 14 setting the standard for space shoot-'em-up games, I would certainly rate this as perhaps the best. It doesn't quite hit the standard of excellence of Mooncrester, but personally I'd have given this a rating in the mid to high 80s. A damn fine space shoot-'em-up. In 7th place with 75% is Dam Busters from US Gold. This game puts you in command of a Lancaster bomber, reenacting the Second World War mission to attack German dams. Crash criticised the playability of this game. Although it tries to be both a simulation and a game, they felt that neither aspect was particularly brilliant. On the simulation side they found there's not much in the way of realism and the gameplay lacked variety. They described it as a good try at something new, but ultimately tedious and a bit of a bore. With the US Gold title page reminiscent of Beachhead and Tapper, I had high expectations for this game. When starting I was extremely disappointed. A badly rendered cockpit view, a black screen with dots on, and a rather annoying clicking noise, supposedly your plane. What it lacks in graphics doesn't seem to make up for in gameplay, with you trundling along until the game decides to end because you hit the ground or your plane has caught fire. Why this rated higher than Star Firebirds I don't know. This isn't a game I'll be playing again. In 6th place with a score of 9 out of 10 is Touchstones of Rhiannon from Adventure International. This is a text adventure based on the 1980s British television series Robin of Sherwood, which itself was based on the legends of Robin Hood. Crash felt that the story of Robin of Sherwood was one very much suited to the medium of adventuring. However, they did feel that the vocabulary in the game had been compromised to save memory for the superlative graphics. They found the difficulty of the game about right. No pushover, but not so difficult to make you want to forget the whole thing. The plot they considered would be one that would maintain your interest throughout. On the whole, it was a good TV tie-in and a superb implementation of the original. Although receiving an overall score of 9 out of 10, the scores for vocabulary and logic brought the average percentage down to 82%. This is a nicely well-presented adventure based on the Robin of Sherwood television series. The graphics do a good job of conveying the atmosphere and location of the story well. My only real criticism of the game is the difficulty level. It starts tough with you trapped in a dungeon, having to find the right combinations of verbs and nouns to escape. Even after you've escaped it's very easy to be captured, and then it's game over. If you like a tough level of challenge, this adventure may be for you. In 5th place, with an overall score of 84%, is Rockford's Riot from Monolith. Subtitled Boulder Dash 2, this is unsurprisingly a follow-up to Boulder Dash, reviewed in issue 12. You control Rockford and have to collect diamonds whilst pushing and avoiding being squashed by boulders. Crash were expecting the game to be a step forward from the original, but concluded that actually it was just a step sideways, lacking any great innovation. Although good, especially for Boulder Dash fanatics, they felt that you may feel slightly cheated if you'd bought the original. Whilst a fun and enjoyable game, they didn't feel it would have lasting appeal once the routes had been learnt. They felt it expensive at £9.95, but as the game came with the original Boulder Dash on the B-side, maybe better value if you didn't already have that game. A good enough game if you like the original Boulder Dash, but there's not a great deal differentiating the two. The graphics are of a similar ilk, and the game still has a similar issue to the original where the scrolling sometimes lags a bit behind where your player is. If you enjoyed the original and want more of the same, it's great. Otherwise, it's not different enough to necessarily bother with. In fourth place is another US Gold game. With a score of 85%, this is Bounty Bob. Bounty Bob is a conversion of the Commodore 64 game of the same name. It's a follow-up to the game Miner 2049er, which never came out on the Spectrum. In this game you control Bounty Bob and have to get through a series of caves, changing the colour of platforms by walking along them. Trying to stop you from doing this are mutants. Unlike some platform games, this one allows you to alter the length of your jump. Crash described it as a fabulous platform game with brilliant playability and highly original touches. They found it had great complexity, with each screen demanding a different skill factor. The sound was well used and the graphics were well drawn with some flicker, but not enough to spoil the playability. They felt it a pity that the game lacked an option to redefine the keys, but generally felt it was a game that would go down well with platform game freaks. Although I like the sound of this game, I didn't really click with it. It feels like a game that would have been considered great in 1984, but doesn't really seem to be anything special or new by this point in the Spectrum's life. The graphic style does look like a lift of the C64, it's not really a natural style for the Spectrum. Platform game fans may enjoy this one, but I don't think I'll be returning to it. In third place with 87% is Macadam Bumper, written by French software house ERE Informatique and released in the UK by PSS. This is a pinball game for up to 4 players, and one that also lets you modify the layout of the pinball table or design a new layout. Crash felt that although pinball was hard to represent accurately on a home computer, this was a reasonable representation of the game. The graphics were not mind-blowingly brilliant but adequate and served their purpose well. They found it instantly playable and quite addictive, and one of the better pinball spin-offs of the Spectrum. All of the reviewers liked the ability to design your own tables and felt this would give the game a longer lasting appeal. It's certainly a reasonable pinball variant, and I don't remember many others for the Spectrum at the time. It's a shame so much of the screen is taken up by artwork, but I guess they want to keep the aspect ratio of the pinball machine correct without needing to scroll. The ability to edit the layout of the board within limits gives the game some additional interest. It's about as good as you'd expect given the limitations of the Spectrum, maybe fun for a few minutes but in no way feels like a classic. In second place this month with 91% is one of only 2 Crash smashes, Nightshade from Ultimate Play the Game. This is a 3D isometric perspective game similar to Nightlaw, more set in an open space through which you can freely move rather than a series of rooms. In this game you do battle with the forces of evil in Nightshade Village by collecting a number of magical items scattered throughout the playing area. Crash were divided on whether this game was up to Ultimate's usual standard, but agreed that it was not one that set new standards in programming. Whereas previous games always appeared to be pushing the limitations of the Spectrum, with this Crash felt they had reached their peak. They found the lack of objects to interact with made the game seem rather flat and uninspiring. However, graphically they found it stunning, and described it as a simple game, maybe appealing to the younger games player, and overall still an excellent and absorbing game. As an Ultimate game, this is one I'd certainly heard of before, but had never played until now. I can see why it got a Crash smash. At the time it was unique. It took the isometric perspective that Ultimate had developed in Nightlaw and Alien 8, and created a different feel of game from it. This one is less individual rooms with obstacles to jump over, and more of an open feel to the area with buildings to enter and leave. A lot of the issues with the early games slowing down when there's a lot of animation have been ironed out, although the game does have a bit of attribute clash. Somewhat dull compared to other Ultimate games, and there's a lot of wandering about without much going on. Still, a worthwhile play. In first place with a score of 92% and a Crash smash is The Way of the Exploding Fist from Melbourne House. This is a karate simulation for 1 or 2 players. Crash described this as by far and away the best sports combat simulation available yet. They found the dynamic graphics fab and liked the variety of moves that could be performed. At this point in the Spectrum's history, it was the best martial art game that had been released at the time, far surpassing Bug Bite's Kung Fu, which had been reviewed in issue 11 but didn't quite make the top 10 in that issue. Although perhaps not as colourful as the Commodore Amstrad versions, they found that the monochromatic figures were still just as effective in their own way. Whilst requiring practice to master the moves, the game really opens up when this has been achieved. In summary, this was the best beat 'em up yet for the Spectrum, and was good value for money, even at £8.95. This is the only game from this issue that I'd played back in the day. I remember loving it at the time, but I'm sad to say that although the graphics and animation as I remember, I'm sure it used to be more fun to play than this. I'm wondering if this is a game that may play better with a joystick. The keyboard layout with 8 keys to use is difficult to get your hands around. The 2-player option definitely adds to the game, and is also a good way of practicing the moves before tackling the computer player. At the time of release, this is probably the best karate game for the Spectrum. I can understand why it has classic status, and it's definitely one to replay. If you have enjoyed this, please like and subscribe to see more videos about retro games from Norlogic Retro.